Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Councillor Pascoe.
How are you, CEO Briggs?
I'm great, thank you. I see you are not in the council chamber, Rob.
No, I was voted out.
No, you weren't voted out. You're still an elected member. You were just outnumbered. There's a difference.
Well, no, I was voted out. I was the only one who wanted to come in to the council chamber today, and the others didn't. The others didn't. Never mind.
I don't recognise that guy McPherson without his hat.
Hang on a sec.
It looks
Oh,
like
there you go.
it looks like it's pretty cold down at the Southern Alps, Dave.
No, we've got better weather than you, mate.
So I gather.
Yeah.
It's lousy weather up here.
Yeah. No, in my t-shirts most afternoons.
Oh, come on.
Look at the sun. Look at the sun behind me. Look at the blue sky. It's real.
Are you down south now, Dave?
Yeah. I'm in Ross, if you know it.
Ross?
Yeah, my family are from there.
Are they? I've never met anyone that came from Ross before. There's hardly anyone living here now.
I know. Yeah, it's a long way. Oh, it's great. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's they're all nice little towns here. They're all actually growing. You're seeing new houses in every one of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's probably all affordable housing down there.
Probably, yeah. Not around Friends Joseph or Fox Glacier though.
Or Queenstown, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, all those touristy places look like mini Queenstowns.
Yeah.
This is no good.
Kia ora, Dave.
G'day.
It's a good view you got in the background there.
Yeah, that was yesterday's view. I haven't put today's on it yet.
Nice.
How's Marie today, Ryan?
Yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, just a bit of a creep. Kind of caught her off guard and got under the skin a bit. Yeah, unfortunately, but yeah, they're out there. I think the fact that he came back and when she wasn't, like, came back from behind and caught her off guard when she thought no one was in the shop.
Yeah.
It sort of triggered it.
Anybody fright?
Yeah.
Assuming we can have a good chat without, as I said to you last night, Ryan, impinging on privacy, but there are some real issues there around the police interaction versus the role of our city safe and what you define as an assault or not. And really good, to use this off, but anyway, I realise we're now live on YouTube, so I'll save that for later. But obviously it does, the broad issue highlights the need for us to have a real good chat about the role of our city safe team and their interactions with our other agencies.
Yeah, I had a really good email from Kelvin, which I'll circulate to you later, Martin.
But I'd be very keen, as a number of councillors would be, to sit down with you and Kelvin just to see, the dare I say it, how we may integrate with the other key agencies.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Excellent. Okay, hang on.
Doesn't this bring back memories, Mayor Paula, to Zoom meetings?
Yeah, fun times.
Pre-normal.
I don't mind Zoom generally, but the bigger it is, the worse it is in some ways, or the longer it is. Anyway, good afternoon, everyone. Good day yesterday, good submitters. Really strange Waikato Times story about that, however. That's what it is.
Can I, Your Worship, Mayor Paula, can I ask that there's a separate discussion, not today, particularly for the long-term plan, as to how we process submissions and the circumstances in which we allow a submission to be essentially presented publicly, anonymously, all right? There's two things I want to mitigate as against the giving license to trolls.
Yeah.
Having said that, there are genuine circumstances where people would wish to keep their name withheld from public view on the basis of genuine submission, and we need to work through that even though their content may be published. Also, in terms of language, I think we need to have some very clear processes, and I'm trying to work out if something comes to a parliamentary select committee what the rules are, particularly to guard against language and making sure that there's natural justice, but also if there are some health issues attached to a submission, perhaps to talk that through before that is presented in the public arena.
Yeah, no, thank you, Martin, and I agree. I had already begun a conversation with Democracy, as Becca, if she's here, or Amy will attest to, because we had that slightly menacing submission, and we weren't quite sure how the gentleman might present himself in council. As it was, he was fined, but some processes around that, when we might say that the submission is not to come forward to the public. A few of you mentioned that. Mark?
Yeah, look, I think it could be quite easily fixed if we just quite simply say that put a very clear message at the beginning of the submission process that any inappropriate language or abuse is not to be tolerated and will not be considered. It's really simple.
With respect, Councillor Bunty, can we park that? I would like just a calm in-house chat so that we observe the open government process of open government. But I think, you know, and this is going to be particularly relevant for how we encourage people to engage with us during the long-term plan process.
Look, all I'm saying is that I've just spent 2 days, 3 days reading through submissions, and that one was vile and to the point of comedic. But there are a lot of them that are actually just abusive, and I'm not going to put up with it because I'm not going to go and speak to our residents with a lack of respect, and I won't be treated that way either. So I'm not putting up.
I agree, and I think Martin's right. There's a place for that. But I agree we should have that conversation because, in fact, as soon as I read one or two of them, I asked the staff what are the procedures for disallowing engagement with someone. Yeah, look, I agree. We'll sort that out, and we will take that time, Martin, to discuss it because I think having a clear way of doing it would be useful. And it'd be helpful.
Just, Paula, not to belabor this, we'll pull something together and discuss it with you, then set up a briefing as appropriate to bring that forward, Mayor.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be good. Thank you. Okay, so councillors, we only listened to a fraction of the submitters, and you will have read the rest of the links online. So today is, as I understand it, and I'll let Sean introduce how he would like this to run, is a chance for us to ask staff for any clarity or information, not necessarily get the answer today, that will enable the staff to put their very best report forward for us for the deliberation stage, because it will slow us down considerably and make us less agile if we have to raise new issues when we are actually into deliberations. So it is a bit of a catch-all as I see it. I don't think there's any wrong or stupid question in here. I think we put them up for the consideration of the staff, and that gives us the chance to collate them and decide if there's common themes that we're interested in, or some of the matters that might be just straightforward dissemination of information. So is that how you see it, Sean?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Paula. Yep. So the real purpose of today is to, if there's anything that elected members have read or heard through the submissions process that they would like clarification on, some of those have come through by email already. If there's anything else that you want to raise today, then please do so. And if there's anything that you've heard through the submissions that you that you think should be considered as part of the annual plan, then also if you can kind of raise those today as well, so that staff have some time to prepare information for next week's meeting. So just,
Okay.
I think Richard mentioned yesterday, the report will be finalised and distributed tomorrow. Finalised and distributed tomorrow, I think it is. And so there's not a lot of turnaround time to introduce a whole lot of new things, but to the extent that we can, we will, but also understanding kind of any things that might get put on the table next week. If there's anything new that's come up, that does at least give us a few days to prepare information prior to the meeting.
So effectively, we adjourned the meeting yesterday. We're now into the next phase of the meeting. We reopen it, and just in that nature, we are on live YouTube, because this is part of the public process. I would like to say to councillors, to get us through the time expedient, come to you, Ryan, I see you, good. What would be good if we don't use this time to politicise issues that we're keen on. This is just really a grab of information. We will have proper time to fly your flag over whatever issues that you feel strongly about in due course, but preferably not today. Amy has told me that there are apologies from Councillor O'Leary, who's not feeling very well today, and that Martin will have to move off this device to another device when he travels somewhere shortly. I don't think there are any more apologies. No more apologies. And we've got lovely Sarah.
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
Sorry, I should just clarify. If there are questions that we can answer today that are kind of relatively simple, and we can kind of perhaps nip those in the bud, then we will do that as well. But yeah. I just don't want to take a lot. Some of the really simple questions could also be clarified by way of an email, factual email as well, which would bring all those. Well, Angela's not here, and that would help her. And Leo's with us today, isn't he, Sarah? Yes. Look at that. Look how he's growing. All right, we'll plough on. I think.
Could we just move and second that one, Paula?
Pardon? Oh yes, sorry. Apologies. Captain.
I'll second.
Councillor Wilson seconds, and I move. Thank you.
Just a question for clarity.
Question, Councillor Hamilton. Yeah.
Thanks. I guess some of my catch points are, some of them are annual plan, some of them I guess are just more actions or job notes for potential tenure plan or other. Is that all right just to bring up? Yeah.
I think it's up to staff to compartmentalise our feedback where it lies. So thanks. Absolutely. Okay, if you've got a particular structure you would like to use to go through this, Sean, or shall I just run down a list of councillors in the first instance?
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that approach, Mayor Paula.
Okay, so just to let you know, councillors, I'm coming at you very soon in the order that I see people on the screen and not for any other reason. So you can come back again at a second go. This is just a first round of feedback, okay? So don't worry if you miss saying something you meant to say. And I'm going to start, as I see it, with Councillor Van Oosten. Lucky first.
Oh, golly. Okay. I guess the issue that fell out of the finance committee, the last finance committee meeting, was the re-hedging of our lending and the financial savings that were going to be made at that point, and just having a really clear idea about what that might mean on the bottom line, and whether there was the opportunity to look to increase some of the spending that we didn't well, it didn't come through the first cut really, or that we cut back on. So I'd just like to have a bit of an understanding about the impact of that and what that might mean for us. So yeah, I'll just.
You want me to answer that now, Mayor Paula?
Yeah. So what
okay.
would be useful is if you just take a little pause, and we can say if it's a question to answer now, later by email, or it's coming in the report. Okay. Thanks, Max. I can't see you, David, but I heard you. Oh, there you are.
I'm here. Yeah. So there's been a number of minor adjustments because, as you know, we're going into year end. So there are a number of provisions and year end entries that adjust our position. But I can tell you that high level, our net surplus used to be, when we consulted, 62,800,000. It is now 65, nearly 66 million. So there's been a net improvement in our surplus. In terms of balancing the books, Councillor Maxine, that the swap amount in terms of upside for this current year will be $4.4 million. Again, there are ups and downs, so that includes things like our year-end depreciation adjustments, DC revenue being reforecasted, consent revenue.
Can I jump in here, David? I don't want to cut you off, but you're probably including a whole lot of stuff that's going to end up in the report. And I think what Councillor Maxine wants to do is understand the risks left, right and centre associated with our hedging strategy and so forth. And doing it verbally is not necessarily the best way of explaining that. It's probably a lot better with the report wrapped around it. I don't think necessarily Councillor Van Oosten wanted the answers today. I think the best thing you can do is say noted and make sure it's incorporated into the report.
Yep.
Yeah, I probably agree. I guess the point that Maxine's making is a good one, that since the draft annual plan was proposed, financially a lot of things have moved around, and do we get the most recent and the implications? That's right, isn't it, Max?
Yeah, and if we can have a look at those as early as possible, because it is possible that it will likely change some of the decisions that we would be making, or that it may make it easier to be able to discuss something that something new or extend something that we were earlier thinking about.
So David, if you can get that out in some form.
So high level there'll be a slight improvement, but in terms of relitigating whether you want to bring anything else in, I think Sean's answered that in terms of the report will be out tomorrow for us to talk about on the 23rd, right? So you'll get the information on the report, and then we'll have the conversation on the 23rd.
Absolutely, and I think the other key point that I think I've heard with what Max said, Sean, is that that should precede some of the other conversations. So we've got the financial lay of the land fully understood, and then yeah, okay, that's cool. Maxine, anything else that stood out?
Yeah, so yesterday there were two submitters that, several actually, that I had a lot of empathy for. In the community sector, that was the Christian Night Shelter and the Women's Refuge. Neither of those are really well formed up, and neither have we heard anything. This is the first time we've really heard from them about these issues, but it's something that I'd like to have a little bit of information on, in terms of how we might be able to find something to support them, or that maybe a suggestion that it's looked at further into the long-term plan decision making. So those two things there. And then the issue of the arts sector. I really feel for the Rivoli Theatre and the Clarence Street Theatre in terms of the buildings and the physical structures that they've got to deal with, and that when they took them over, they were in the condition that they were in, knowing that they needed a lot of attention to it, and that perhaps we haven't supported them as well as we might have. But that I think Nancy talked about a really exciting idea of matching. And so I think that that's quite interesting to look into, and what might that look like in this annual plan, and how might it be supported out more widely. I think those are the issues there. There was, of course, Toti coming in talking about those two issues that I think are for later, but that I don't have the information necessarily about the three options for the Founders Theatre, which would be really good to be able to have that level of, wasn't really at the table at that point. So having that information would be really useful as a background to that.
Thank you. So there's some quick cool points. If the arts sector type of discussion is part of the lead up to the LTP, it would be good to understand that too. Because some things will fit very well within this current annual plan, and others will be very good topics to inform our LTP. So, but we did clearly hear the founders' submission yesterday. So thank you. I'll come back to you later if I've got any more now.
Okay, thank you.
Dave's asked if he could go next because he's got something to go to, so I'll do that.
Yeah, I can't stay here where I am, sorry. But thanks for that, Paula. Look, certainly agree with Maxine's point about the cost of borrowing, and that's quite important to get that accurate. Another thing that I would like staff to do a little bit more work on, they may have done it and I haven't seen it in the last couple of days, I'm not sure, but that's the latest state of play with the shovel ready and other stimulus projects, and their best guess about where we're going to end up, whether that if it's not going to change anything significantly, but I'm getting the feeling that the window's narrowed on what's going to go through and what isn't. So I'd just like an update on that for us for next week, so that we can make sure that our borrowing and our contributions sort of are all as accurately as possible updated for that. The other thing, it's sort of in response to one of the or a couple of the submissions about how the comment that was made that spending on stimulus projects is not an investment. Can't remember the bloke's name, the one who said he was a refugee from Wellington. I would, we have had, and this might be something more that we put out in the commentary afterwards, but I have seen figures about the return on investment in relation to jobs and economic sort of development in the community in the past, and I'd like a bit more information on that as well to be able to respond later on perhaps to the people that claim stimulus spending by us isn't an investment. So that's the point.
Councillor McPherson, I think that's for all investment he was referring to, including all infrastructure, not the stimulus spending. So I hear your point. We'll provide that, but I think it's broader than just stimulus stuff as well.
It is, but Rod Bowman also homed in on that point a little bit as well, and specifically talked about stimulus spending.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And there's a measure. There's other measures of outcomes, other wellbeing measures, not all financial as well. So here, Dave. That's it for now?
That's me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
There we go. Hello. Yeah, just similar to Maxine's. I was really interested in the arts funding ideas. What would help me greatly, and how long have you guys got to work on getting this information for us? Because I don't want to overload you.
Sean, it's not long, is it?
It comes out tomorrow, so we'll get as much as we can to the report. Some of the stuff, if it's beyond that, may have to be dripped out.
Yeah, I'm happy for it to be dripped out. It's more. What I want to find out is, for context, is the arts funding models from similar councils, Dunedin, Wellington, Christchurch, not necessarily Auckland, because that's sort of like a case in itself. Just for context, to see our relativity or how much we are funding and whether they have other funding mechanisms in place. Because a big, strong message that came through to me was Jeremy wants us to help advocate for funding from other people. So I just want to see where those channels are. So could I get some sort of information on how the arts are funded and to what extent in Dunedin, Christchurch, Wellington, possibly Tauranga, similar size cities, because they may have some great ideas in there we can find. I was really interested in both Nancy and the gentleman from Riverlea talking about different funding models. Like the community loans scheme is an interesting one. And I was wondering if we could somehow make contact with Well Energy Trust, because they had a really successful community loans organisation. Now that was done by a third party, not necessarily by them. And all that information's there. And I was wondering if we'd somehow get access to how that ran to see if that's a possibility. And the similar applies to events funding as well. So arts and events funding, if I could find out to what level events are funded in our cooperative or our similar cities. So yeah, that's really about it. I'd be very keen to get a clear picture on the history of our creative funding or our arts funding and our events funding, because I'm actually pretty dark on that, or blank on that area.
Okay, so with that point is well made between the two of you about the arts funding, so I don't think anyone else needs to comment on that.
Yeah.
But because otherwise we'd just be repeating each other.
Yeah, and honestly, that's just for information.
Yeah, and just some steering, Richard, Sean, whether what the solution to the gap in arts funding is, and actually an annual plan thing or a long-term plan thing, something we can socialise and work on. And I know people submitted, but some of them did say that they saw it as a long-term thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we've got other mechanisms, but yeah, it would certainly help me with the information if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not trying to stem the information, but
cool.
Okay, Martin. Was that it? That was it, Mark, was it? Martin?
Yeah, sorry. Yep, thank you. Round one, and then I'll be back for round 2 or 3. But the issue of, obviously identifying which bits of this naturally go into our LTP discussion. I just want to start with Toti Trust, and I want to explain my understanding with regard to the future of Founders Theatre. While we've looked at options, I was anticipating that if there was a final proposal to do X or Y, I'm not aware that the new council has really seriously discussed this. Now, I'm very clear, speaking as a former deputy mayor under a former mayor, this is a new mayor, a new council. Frankly, you can do what the heck you like. That's democracy. And there may be things that you do that will cause me great angst and pain, but it's called numbers. So I want to be crystal clear, just as in my view, I think somewhat unwisely, you have proceeded to open a potential Pandora's box with the municipal pools, but I'm open-minded, all right? I thought we were on a direction with regard to the municipal pool site, but clearly, obviously, the new council's decided it's going to have a relook at that site again for a potential aquatic facility, potentially. So I would put the founders in the same category, and obviously, we will look with interest during the LTP process for the Toti Trust to come back to us. Can I just also pick up and emphasise Bunty's point around the Community Infrastructure Fund? And what I want to avoid is, say, people coming to our annual plan or LTP doing a bit, whether it's for Clarence Street or this project or that project. What I like about an infrastructure fund, it goes through a proper due process of detachment. It's to a degree depoliticised. It's got to stack. There's got to be a business case, which then brings me to how crucial it is to really work out what is our future relation with Well Energy Trust as a capital beneficiary. The recent fibre sale, whether you agree or disagree with that, is not a good sign in terms of the state of that relationship. And obviously there's a new Well Energy Trust elected with 13% of the vote. That is probably going to go off in a different direction. What is our relationship with Trust Waikato? And I acknowledge the work that Bunty and Kesh are doing already, in terms of the special fund we had. So I'm wondering if we could do another discussion, perhaps it's an LTP discussion, to look at what could be our relationship, with those two trusts. The housing fund that we've contributed to is probably a potential example. I just want to pick up the age-friendly submissions. And again, I want to put that into the LTP because that is also to do with urban renewal. And as you know, I'm hot to trot on renewing our high density areas, things called footpaths, street lighting, vegetation. How does that sit for people who have mobility issues? So I think that sort of ties in. But again, I think the age-friendly stuff is dovetails into that whole LTP urban renewal. I just noted the Property Council versus the Chamber of Commerce, both well thought through submissions, and do note the slight differences in terms of 3.8 versus 2.5. You know, they were considered submissions, so I think that's of great interest. Can I just also perhaps finally shout out to Rob, thank him for his questions, and obviously, as per the email, I'm going to be looking forward to those particular answers that he's raised. Finally, with regard to the Colin Jones, Gary Mallett submission, again, please, you may not always agree with Gary, you may not always agree with Colin, but please obviously don't discount that, open mind, and I'm certainly looking forward to a broad consideration. And I did find Colin's comparative with the much geographically larger Christchurch of interest in terms of land supply. But again, these are all LTP issues, and I see, and my chief executive is looking with great enthusiasm to my contribution there. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. And did you want to say something, Richard, or you were just thumbs upping? Thumb up. Yeah, now, thank you, everyone. And I do note, and you're right, Martin, some of these will be issues that staff decide to slot into the long-term plan because they weren't covered in the submission or the draft annual plan. I'm expecting that we have some sort of transparency around that, so we can go back to the public and say, we heard you and we're considering this for the long-term plan.
And just, sorry, one more thing, obviously picking up Professor Clarkson's submission, he couldn't be there, but the other submissions around the whole issue of biodiversity, really want to make sure that we punch that up in terms of our plan, in terms of just stressing that we're in that similar place.
Thank you. Richard?
Mayor Paula, what we'll try and include either at this next meeting or otherwise is some of the work streams that will come out of the 10-year plan, which may well also satisfy elected members that there is work underway in these areas that have been raised as part of this process, just to give clarity, because there's a whole, like everyone's mentioned so far, there's stuff for the annual plan, stuff for the 10-year plan. We want to make sure that we don't end up chasing a tail at this point in time, and it's more of a substantive piece of work that's needed for a 10-year plan horizon. So we'll do our best to highlight that stuff. Like the DC policy review work is already kicked off, and so forth and so forth. So that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I just think the public have the right to know where it sits. So if they made a point and they weren't sure if it was annual plan or long-term plan, we make it clear where it is, so they know it hasn't gone away and not been heard in any way. So thanks, Martin. Kesh.
Thank you. Most of it's been covered. Just coming back to something Maxine said about the current financial status, I think it would be quite good to have the modeling redone as well on the 2.8 versus 3.8 rates increase, just so we know where we're at with the current finances. If that's not too much to ask, please. The other thing was from yesterday's verbal submissions, there were 5 speakers who came in asking for funding, most of them for stuff that I hadn't heard of before. So just checking, is that like, what's the usual process? Like, are we meant to now think about whether we include it in the annual plan versus long-term plan, or do these go to the committees for discussion for later?
Sean, do you want to answer that one, or do you want me to answer it?
You can answer it.
Go, Sean.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it is up to you as elected members if you want to raise those things through the annual plan. I think generally things that haven't come through to this point, like most of those things would tend to be LTP matters. But as an elected member, you've got the right to raise things if you so wish. If you think there's an urgent need to change what we're doing in the current financial year.
Gotcha.
Can I just add to that?
Sean, sorry, am I right in assuming that if anything comes in or goes out, that we'll still have that agility to calculate, David, as we go?
Yes, you will. Hey, the other aspect, Councillor Kesh, is that anything that we change that's significant may trigger the need to reconsult. So we would, as staff, be advising any significant changes, which none of these are, to be pushed down to the 10-year plan phase. The other aspect is, as elected members, you can make any changes at any particular point of time outside the annual plan and 10-year plan phase as well, if there's something that pops along that you believe is significant during the year, and ask staff to consider making changes at that point. Same rules apply. If it's significant, it might trigger a change, or it might just be a budget variance.
Got you. I think knowing that it was the first time we heard about some of these things, it might be good to actually get the background information first before including it in the annual plan. And just coming back quickly to the arts conversation, I'm not sure if it's been flagged already, but it sounds like we need a wider discussion, just not only on the arts funding, but also in terms of the infrastructure loan scheme, and just how the arts environment looks like for the next 2 to 3 years, and who fits in where, because we're hearing different opinions all the time, and you've got people from one theatre saying one thing, another theatre saying another thing, you've got Momentum telling us another thing. So I think it would be quite good to have that broader discussion on just where we're heading and how we're going to fund sustainable arts theatres moving forward, because I'm not very I think we need that discussion first before I can personally make any decisions on who gets funded how. We just need to know how that whole environment is going to be working. The other thing, just quickly,
Councillor Kesh, so you're happy for us to circulate that information offline, because there's a whole lot of work that's already been done in that space, so we can just recirculate some of the previous work and then bring it to head in a briefing in the coming year for the 10-year plan. Yeah,
there's a whole lot more we're about to do too, Kesh.
Yeah, that's right.
And want to do so. Yeah.
Can I just jump in and say, Creative Waikato have done a very good ecosystem paper. I think we might have circulated, I'm not sure, but we can recirculate that. It'll probably help you, Kesh, and other elected members, just to give you their take on the environment from a from their industry, representative sector type organisation viewpoint. I think it's a really good. Dr. Jeremy Mayles actually put that together, so I think it's really worthwhile having a look at that.
It went out last term, Lance. I don't think this new council has it, so we'll flick that out.
Thank you.
Anything else, Kesh?
The last thing was just coming back to, can't remember who mentioned it, but talking about the commercial rates deferral. Can't remember what it was called now, but they compared it to the system that Auckland was using, and that the deferral was for a longer period plus an additional 12 months to pay off any outstanding balances. I can't remember who spoke about it, but if we can have some sort of information on what Auckland's actually doing, and just for something to compare
I think that was the Property Council that raised that, but yeah, it was in that submission, wasn't it? Yeah.
Possibly. But yes, that's it for now. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you. Ewan?
Yeah, thank you. Look, first couple of comments. Having been through a few annual plans now, it's quite natural to go through what we've just done and try to fix every issue that is raised, and lose track and realise that a majority of what we heard about really sits in the long-term plan discussion we're about to have. And so my comments are going to be relatively conservative and sort of saying that there wasn't a lot that I've read or heard that changes, in my opinion, the current draft plan that we've gone out to consult on. I think issues over theatres, founders are all very important issues that need to be discussed, but they live in the long-term plan discussion. And I really encourage some of the new councillors who are coming to terms with Riverlea, Clarence Street, Meteor, to look back. You don't have to look very far back at some of the history and how council has gone through this and handed these assets over based on a number of undertakings. So it will be really important, and I would really encourage councillors to bring themselves up to speed because some of the applicants may have short memories about what they promised way back when we positioned the assets in such a way. So I just really encourage you to do that. 3 other things, and I'm nearly finished. The only issue I have felt that we may need, in my opinion, that I'd be interested in rediscussing is city safety, and that's really to support my good friend Ryan and some of the concern, and my good friend Angela, and some of the concerns they've raised, and maybe I was a little premature in my position on that matter, so I'd be happy to rediscuss that. I have not read anything, or I've not listened to anything.
Yeah, and we've lost.
Sorry, have you lost me?
We did. Did anyone else see that? Cut out in sound.
No, I think it was just you. Yeah.
Just me. Oh well, carry on.
You're special.
You've had enough of me already, Paula.
Didn't touch it.
Okay, so what I was about to say is I haven't read or heard anything that would sway me away from the 3.8. In fact, I heard a lot of support and a lot of reasoning to justify that position. And my last comment would be picking up on Councillor Maxine's points. I think there will be some savings that will be recognised with some of the latest iterations of finances. And I would just like to signal a cautionary tale that maybe we shouldn't be looking for how we should spend that, but actually how we should save it and keep it in the war chest. Although, maybe paying the CEO slightly more would be justified. So, Richard, I just thought that would make you smile. But so that we save it for a rainy day. So I'm really trying to encourage you, if there is some savings, that we should see if we can reduce the deficit, keeping in mind we are going out to the people and saying, actually, we can't balance the books. We're having to continue to borrow to cover our day-to-day operating expenses. And so I think that would be a really good and more meaningful contribution than any sort of meaningless reduction of rates between 3.8.
You're sort of getting a little bit into deliberation there, Ewan. So instead of raising questions, but yeah, no, it's cool.
Sorry. That was it.
Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paula. You'll all be aware that I did take Richard's request up yesterday about sending back some early feedback. I sent 2 emails, one on the Jones and Mallet submissions, which I don't think are annual plan stuff, but certainly perhaps suggesting a way forward for that. The rest of my the other 5 items that I put on the email today, I think are self-explanatory. I guess where I disagree a little bit with Councillor Ewan is that I think we should relook at the original plan, given the changing environment, the changing COVID environment. I think it's worse now than it was at the time that we formulated the plan to go out for discussion. I think we were relaxed that we'd got over the worst part, and I don't believe we have. And so I've asked the staff, and one of the points I asked this morning, just to have a look and see whether or not we need to re-look at the provisions that we've made in the annual plan currently for level 2. Should we go back to level 3 or level 4 as a result of what's been happening since we put that plan together? But my other points, I think, unless anyone has a disagreement on those, are ones that the staff could look at between now and tomorrow and next week, unless the staff have concerns about that. in terms of turnaround.
Thank you.
I think we're fairly comfortable, team.
Thank you, and thank you for putting those together last night.
Thank you, Rob.
Appreciate it. Deputy Mayor Taylor. Jeff.
Thanks, Paula. Right. I'll tell you what's on my mind, and I think most of it will be applicable to the annual plan, but a little bit of it may not be. Number one, agree with what Rob just said regarding COVID, and also with what Kes said about having another look at the remodelling, given that the financial situation from the councils seems to have changed a little, and that COVID, I think, has worsened, and there's worse to come. So, and there were some submissions, indeed, from the Property Council was one of them, asking us to have another look at that rate rise. So, disagree with my good friend Ewan on that one. Number two, living wage. I came out of yesterday even less comfortable than I was before about that decision that we had made on the living wage. Is there any chance of getting some more clarity on potential costs in future years? I don't know if there is, but I would like to see some more, because I think we're making a big mistake there. The echo Dave's comments about the shovel-ready projects, which we seem to be getting not a lot of luck with, and just concerned about how we might cater for that in the next few months if suddenly at the end of August is an election year kind of thing, we suddenly find a couple of things plucked out and maybe we're asked to co-fund or come up with some money. How will we deal with that? At the moment, it doesn't seem to be an issue, but there is that uncertainty, and that worries me a little. Founders stuff was sort of a bit of a bombshell yesterday, I thought, and this is outside the annual plan, I guess, but for a project that looks to me 10, 20 million, how are we going to plan for that in terms of our consultation and our own planning things? I would hate to see timeframes for a realistic vision for what happens to Founders Theatre sidelined by some pie in the sky nonsense. That's probably about, in terms of the financial situation with COVID, I don't know what economic indicators we may have that are more relevant than what we had before. I did see something the other day saying between February and June, the number of job seekers, the number of people on job seekers in Hamilton had gone up by a third. It would just be interesting to get a feel for what else we think may be coming, just to help guidance. But that's probably not something that staff can do in the short. Maybe that's up to us to continue doing as elected members. And that would be about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, is this a good time to come to you?
Yes, yep.
Thank you.
Well, maybe. We'll see. Eyes have opened. So on similar page with Maxine, just keen to understand, we had several submissions from the arts community in regard to ring-fenced funding. And I guess I'm keen to understand what options we have for the annual plan and then long-term plan. There were different, I guess, funding models mentioned, which are in those submissions. But if there is anything that we could do for the annual plan, for example, ring fencing some existing community funding, or whether it's something new, I'd just be interested in knowing what those options are. In terms of those two submissions from the Women's Refuge and the night shelter, just keen to note probably those, since they have come to us for the first time, a more long-term plan issues, but just keen to know, get a little bit more information about those particular proposals and what funding we're already providing them, and if there's any opportunities to provide assistance with our current funding models. Go Eco mentioned just mentioned a project manager. So in terms of Waiwhakariki, that I guess a project manager had been put on hold, and I just wanted to get clarification. It's not really, wasn't mentioned in the annual plan, but they brought that up, and I wanted clarification from staff on what has happened there.
I can answer that now. No, it's not on hold. It's being appointed soon.
Okay, cool. Thank you. What else have we got? So there were a lot of submissions concerned about the delaying of cycleways, and we had some discussion around this, and with the Eastern Pathways, the fact that deferring some of the funding wouldn't affect the speed of the project. I'd like to get, I guess, some very clear written clarification around the impact of any deferrals on any cycling infrastructure, just for the benefit of those submitters, so that's clarified, and also just to understand if anything other than Eastern Pathways in terms of cycling infrastructure is actually being deferred. There was mention of cycling connectivity projects, and I hadn't noticed that they were being deferred, but just to have that clarified as well. And finally, at this stage, the Fairfield Hall, can we get more information on that? That was mentioned in a couple of submissions about the sad state of it. I just, keen to know what the situation is there. Finally, in the age-friendly submission, they talked about wanting, or I guess, that to be taken into account with all infrastructure. Could we get, I'd be keen to get some kind of, I guess, confirmation that all of our planned projects in the annual plan, which are going ahead, will be universally designed, that's, I guess, committed to, so that is taken into account. So that's all at this stage. But I think the main thing for the annual plan itself was that ring fence funding for the arts.
Thank you. Ryan?
Thanks, Mayor Paula. Just going through a couple of things. The arts policy stuff's been talked about, but I just wonder, Lance is here, I wonder if you could give me an update. I know staff were rejigging our whole arts policy and everything, and just wondering where that's at and where that's landing.
There's a couple of pieces of work. We're looking at an arts and culture strategy that's several months away, so that and elected members be involved in that. It's really about our approach to that in a whole bunch of different ways. There's a public arts process which we'll be reviewing, and then the community assistance policy is also, which governs our grants and things like that, was due to be reviewed. So there's sort of those three main streams of work, Councillor Ryan, and we were hoping to have those finished so it could influence the long-term plan discussions later in the year.
Okay, thanks. So that'll flow through Mark's committee in due course.
Correct. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Just the other thing, which I guess maybe as a side note for Richard in terms of a reimagining funding, we've had the arts piece come up in terms of how we fund it, whether it's servicing infrastructure. We've had the need for, and obviously I've got a clear conflict with the night shelter that's pretty transparent, but at a high level, there's obviously a lot of need for community funding, women's refuge, and then the events fund, which is another element coming up. So we've got arts, community, and events funding. We always seem to be tinkering around, do we increase the fund or how do we do it? I just wonder if we need to reimagine those three pots altogether, and to take Nancy's point, do we go out to the community and say, here's the quantum of the fund, and we will match it up to $1 million with the community or something. I just wonder if we can be a little bit more, the quantum needs to be bigger for a start, and I wonder if we can do something a little bit out of the box, because we seem to tinker around these three funds every year. So I'll just leave that as an offline for Richard, but I'd like to perhaps pursue that because he likes the word reimagine.
So last year, Councillor Hamilton.
What's the new word?
it's definitely not agile or pivot.
Right, carry on, carry on.
Investment.
Spend. Ro Aotearoa. I think Sarah picked up on the age-friendly aspect of it, but was it Rangi Moana, or she mentioned infrastructure that they needed upgrading, and I didn't know what she was referring to. I don't know if anyone from staff could elaborate.
Well, I know. They have a hall and a small marae part, and it's very, very small. It's always jammed up. So they also have some live-in areas for some of the kaumātua. They're looking to expand their public hall for greater services, really. And it's very old and leaky and things like that. So if you look on their website, you'll find that they've got a restoration and expansion project on that site in Brandon Street, Frankton, wherever that is. I've been there a few times.
Okay, so that kind of gets wrapped up in that whole funding conversation.
Yeah, and they're looking for capital funding. So it's a project, a rebuild project.
Okay, and just the zoo, and this sort of sits between the annual plan and long-term plan, but that's something that I've spoken about quite keenly about, and I know obviously Mark and Kesha and Ewan and I from an economic development point of view, but I really want to see us make sure that we've got the ducks in a row for the 10-year plan to really put it on steroids in terms of the three groups that Graham Pollard talked about, having some unity with them in terms of stakeholder engagement and the potential of a project governance type group to really get some serious funding mechanism behind that. I've talked to Lance about that, so I'll just leave that as a comment.
Hey Ryan, if it helps, I'm actually meeting with them next week to have that very discussion. Probably doesn't involve funding or anything to that effect, but the conversations are pretty well underway. If it helps, you're welcome to come along.
Yeah, thanks. And I think Graham used the term biological centre of excellence, and I think whether it's the breeding potential of that place, this is something that we're really sitting on, something that's got such latent potential, the largest land area for a zoo in New Zealand. So I really want to keep that momentum building. And to Martin's earlier point on the Well Energy Trust, I don't know, Paula or Richard, perhaps you could answer in terms of the mechanism back to council. Does that come through full council or could it come through ED? I'm relaxed. The reason why with our submission last year, we picked up on the unrealised ability for us to really partner with them as a capital beneficiary and potentially to align some of our 10-year plan projects. So I don't want to lose momentum given that there's a shift in terms of their governance. I think I've emailed you and James, Paula, but just how you see us harnessing that mechanism in relationship.
I don't rightly know. I've had my first point of contact with the new board at their induction morning tea thing, and that's it. Under new chairmanship now. So Richard, how would you propose that we dealt with that?
I don't necessarily have an answer off the top of my head now. Let me put some pondering to it, and I'll get back through.
And yeah, just wondering what committee or what the mechanism comes back to us. I know
how have they done that historically? Have they?
Well, generally, it's been council thing. It's been a conduit through the mayor and the chief executive. More recently, we've got to include chairs of other committees into it as well. Leave it with me. I'll have a chat to the chief executive there, and we'll follow it through and build a program. It probably has a number of feelers in a number of areas, so leave it with me. I just don't have an answer off the top of the head at the moment.
Yeah, something we need to think about, I think.
Yeah, thank you. That's all for now.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret.
Thanks, Paula. Much has been said already. The two standouts for me would be the arts sector discussion, and like Ewan, I recall the discussions we had with several of the arts groups, namely Clarence Street, Meteor and Riverlea, just around their independence and their desire to be in charge of their own destiny. And yes, they said, look, give us the infrastructure and we'll look after it and we'll do our thing. So clearly this is time for another discussion. I think that sits more in the LTP realm, but I am concerned about, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect, and I think there's an opportunity for us to show some leadership and perhaps bring the groups together and just sort out, well, how can we support you? How can we support you to support yourselves? Where does Creative Waikato sit in all this? My understanding was that Creative Waikato was there, yes, to represent the arts sector in the region, but clearly there's some work to be done here in Hamilton. And when we've got regional funding that's being put up by central government and Creative Waikato is only getting a small part of that, I'm thinking, well, perhaps there's an opportunity for council to weigh in and lend some support as well, because I really think that we need to leverage what we've got, our potential, and see if we can grab some more money there. So I see a roundtable discussion with all of members of the arts sector, including Toti as well, and how can we help them be more self-sufficient? How can we help them be more independent as well as sustainable? The second thing that popped up for me was just around a heritage fund. I really liked, I can't remember the submission, but I really liked the submission where somebody suggested, look, we've got some character precincts, not necessarily heritage, but character precincts, and how can we support people to maintain those character homes more easily? And yeah, it occurred to me, well, what else are we doing to support our heritage funds? Toti, obviously, it's a big impetus for them. So in that regard, I would say probably not annual plan, but long-term plan. How can we beef up and support our heritage fund? But is there also an opportunity to support our character precincts, and what might that look like? How can we encourage and support people who want to look after what they've got? The other things that I had in my mind were pretty consistent with what's already been said. I think there's an opportunity to sit down with Mr. Jones as well. Clearly he has done a lot of work, and let's work in the same direction rather than butt heads with council staff. So that's all I have to offer.
Thank you, Margaret. Just a couple of things from me, and then we'll whiz round the SLT members to see if there's anything that popped up that they want to talk about. And then councillors, if you've missed anything or you've got an aha moment, we'll deal with that. Just from my perspective, a couple of things. The gully, Nature in the City Gullies restoration, needed some clarity over that. I think maybe I've just missed something, and it's possible, we're very busy. I didn't realise that the $100,000 set aside for gullies was set aside for just 9 gullies under the administration of Go Eco. So not casting any stones at any of those projects or Go Eco's ability to manage the fund, but just wanted that broader picture, Lance. And I spoke to you yesterday about the overall gully system in Hamilton. Vis-a-vis Bruce Clarkson's report was really good, and we know that the 9 mentioned gullies are actually only 9 that have coalesced, but there are quite a lot of other gullies, including the one at the end of the West Town Belt, for example, Chartwell Park and a few others, where some additional planting might also be beneficial outside of the ones named. Just like to understand whether it would be better in some kind of contestable situation like other funding that we have. I haven't formed a view on it. It was just the first time that I realised that the way it was worded in the submission, correctly or incorrectly, was that there were potentially 9 beneficiaries and 1 administrator, and I just wanted some clarity on that, if I might, please. And the other one of interest to me was around the business support too. We've proposed some mechanisms to support business that were described by one of the submitters as soft and too short term, not really hitting the nail on the head. So a response to that in the deliberations report would be good. How do we know that we've picked the most effective tool to support business? That just to make me feel confident in that way. And the Mayor's job, of course, is to take on board the views of the majority under a democracy, which I have done with the 3.8% proposed annual plan. Having said that, I'm still going to raise the flag for any opportunity to soften that, which is consistent with some of the ratepayers' submissions. Things which don't affect employment directly, or don't take a job off a staff member, and you know, the small delay, deferment, or slight change in the project really doesn't have a material impact in the long term, but has some impact on the short term. Especially, and David, just in respect to the use of debt, that debt ceiling. Not saying we would use debt to soften rates at all, but just understanding the interconnection between all of those factors, if I might. And I understand that's what will come out in the report. Okay, so yep, that's me. That's my 3 things. I'll go through the SLT members just to see if there's, from their portfolios, whether there were any flags that they wanted to raise for us, and then we'll just check in with everybody as to what's what.
Can I kick off, Mayor Paula?
Sure.
Yep, cool. Hey, I thought yesterday was, and the submissions were actually on a whole really good in terms of an annual plan in a COVID environment. So it wasn't too shocking. There's a few things that what we've identified is because this annual plan is premised on a 10-year plan, which is undertaken by a previous council, there's probably a wad of information that hasn't been shared with the current elected members as this forms in this council format. So what I'm going to ask my team to do is, I may note it in the conversation now, but also circulate and provide links to previous reports, just so councillors that haven't had a chance to read previous documents, and I think a couple of the councillors, including Councillor Wilson, Gallagher and so forth, alluded there was other information out there, just so that everyone's on the same page. I'm not trying to do this to sway anyone, it's just making sure that everyone's well informed. That's my only comment. We'll just make sure there's a few things regarding the theatre, the arts, development contributions and everything like that, that is probably really relevant for everyone to understand. Cool. I'll hand it over to my guys, and you can manage who you want to speak next.
Oh, thank you. We'll go to Sean Murray.
Oh, look, I had nothing major. I'll circulate my notes to everyone. I guess my only comment I'd have on the theatres is just quickly, we did a major review of the theatres. We had 3 theatres on our portfolio. They were all underutilised, not that well maintained. And out of the review, the theatre groups and different organisations felt that they could do a better job and be more self-sustaining and financially self-sustaining if they were able to hold revenues themselves. And that's the move we did. We did what they asked at the end of the day, and they were well aware of the condition of buildings. They had lobbied us on the basis that they could raise money that we couldn't to fix the buildings, and that they could operate pretty efficiently so as to be self-sustainable. So I think over time it's just been proof that it hasn't been that easy for them to do. So there is, as Councillor Wilson said, there is some another side of the story from earlier conversations to be considered. And the only other comment I'd have in terms of the events fund that's discussed a lot, we have a policy in place at the moment. The question we have is, should we review the policy? The events fund is very much wrapped around economic benefit, not necessarily community benefit, but it does balance off. The events fund has shrunk, in my time here, every LTP from where it's been to where it is now. The simple reality for a lot of the groups that have come through on the events fund is it's a limited budget and people miss out as a result of that. against the policy and the criteria. It's as simple as that. People miss out because there's only so much budget against all the different numbers of people that are applying for budget, even if some of the applications don't actually fit the criteria or even relate to what they're about. They're just trying to find a source of money somewhere. So that's the only general comment I'd have.
Thank you. Jen?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. So just on I'll pick the heritage issue first. So we have our heritage plan change briefing on the 5th of August that Alice Morris will be running, and she'll be able to touch on some of these aspects that have come up at that session. So that's coming up. And then the only other one, Councillor Rob, I will respond to your email. I'll give you a bell a little bit later on as well. But just in terms of Mr. Jones's conversation yesterday and his areas of concern, we have spent considerable time and resources and energy reviewing Mr. Jones's position across the years, and believe that our work is solid. It's been independently reviewed by lawyers and economists, and confirmed in reports by MBIE's experts and their officials and the Ministry for the Environment. So the work is solid. I'll share that information with you. It was shared towards the end of the last term, so I'll make sure that you guys all have that. In terms of conversations about the issues that he's talking about, in the next month we have a urban regeneration and intensification briefing coming up. We have the housing strategy conversation coming up as well. So both of those will touch on that. We're also stepping into the growth funding conversation for the LTP, so that will also form part of that conversation. But also the National Policy Statement for Urban Development is about to land. I understand the government are likely to gazette it in the next few weeks. When that comes into play, we will be into our next round of capacity assessments, and that capacity assessment will be due in the middle of next year. But there were a number of really detailed issues that were raised. I'm really happy to cover them off with you if you want to drop me an email and we can talk about those. Otherwise, we'll just move into the 10-year plan.
Yeah, look, Jen, my email wasn't intended to be a criticism. It was an attempt to try and find a way forward, because he seems to be clearly passionate about what he's doing. We're obviously the same. We've got affordable housing on everyone's agenda who's sitting around the table today, and so has he. So I was just really looking to see if there were some options.
Can I pick this up, Jen? Can I just jump in here? So basically one of the things, sorry Jen, I just make it.
Go for it.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to do, and this is regardless of Mr. Jones, Mr. Mallett, or anyone out there, is I want to pull together like Jen's alluded to, a focused approach to strategic funding. I don't want to talk about DCs anymore, because there's so many strategic funding opportunities out there, including strategic growth funding, including DCs, SPVs, housing infrastructure loans, targeted rates. All these things are mechanisms for funding growth. And secondly, we want the best people around that. So the elected members, the staff, but also members of the community. And I'm not going to necessarily pick those people that are the noisiest. I'm going to be picking those people who may still be the noisiest, who are the smartest people that can make the biggest contribution.
Yeah, I agree.
Just in respect to Jen's comment about furnishing you with some greater detailed response, which I think is good, but it needs to go to all elected members as a matter of record for the meeting.
No, absolutely will.
Thank you. That's cool. So if you could just reattach it with Rob's, or even write into Rob's with highlighted writing, then it will be easy for us to follow through. That would be good. Thank you. Anything else, Jen?
No, that's a lot. Thank you.
Okay, Chris is hiding, but he's there. Yeah.
Yep, I'm here. Not much from me. Like councillors have already noted, particularly Councillor Wilson. That a number of matters raised are best dealt with in the 10-year plan, and that's absolutely correct. Just quickly, to give some councillors assurance in response to Gary Mallett's submission, look, you are not flying blind in relation to capacity for infill. Look, it's a really difficult issue, but what we do to inform you is up there with the best in business in terms of the work we do. But our data comes together with Jen's land use data in a 3-yearly discussion called an LTP. So that's the right place to have the discussion, and you're not flying about blind. What we do is pretty good to inform you. So yeah, that's all from me, listening to all the submissions.
Thank you. Lance?
I just wanted to mention it was really good to hear elected members talk about the LTP versus the annual plan. I think Councillor Ewan brought that up quite strongly. Some of the things I heard yesterday and what I've read in submissions, there's a bit of work to be done, and there's some discussion with elected members to be done. So I think it's really good that you're talking about next, I think it's Thursday's meeting, is identifying what is a LTP discussion versus an annual plan discussion. And I would just mention that, just carefully considered structured policy-based approaches versus one-off ad hoc fundings. I'd strongly advise that you take that into account. I'm not going to tell you how to do your jobs or be governors, but I think that's really important. The other thing I want to reiterate is Sean Murray's point. We've heard a lot from the arts in the annual plan. Look, there's a massive growing issue around sustainability of funding, not just for arts groups, but community groups generally, whether it's sports. And Sport News are doing a lot of work on that. They're doing some futures planning, but also the disability sector, health, youth, elderly, ethnic groups, et cetera. So, look, you guys know that, but arts aren't alone. Yes, they've probably to some degree been the poor cousins, for funding, whether it's from central, local government or other funders, and not all funders. But I think just bear that in mind as well. I think Richard's point around the information and history will supply you with some information about some different funding models that actually happened here some time ago. There used to be a loan guarantee system for some of the organisations that build facilities on our parks and things like that. It was actually revoked 9 years ago because it became very problematic, and it added to our debt profile as well, because we were basically the guarantor at the bank. So, and Blair and I worked on that almost a decade ago. So there's some quite good historical information there and some learnings from that as well. And the other thing is we were programmed in, and it sounds like we might have to bring it forward, was having a good discussion around grants in September. There was a briefing booked in for that, and I know Mayor Paula, you and I have discussed that, and also Councillor Mark, where we go with our with all our different grants and that sort of thing. So I think it's quite timely that this is all coming together. But and I think just looking at it, I think there's been a lot of support for our proposals too, and I think Councillor Ryan highlighted that with the Zoo Waiwhakariki proposal, and that's one area where I think my team, just listening to learning for me, is my team probably need to let elected members know a little bit more around those longer term plans for the zoo, not just the hard build, but those other plans around the visitor experience and that sort of thing. So I can feel a really nice field trip coming on for elected members in the next wee while.
Excellent, like a nice field trip. Eva, Lisa, and then David, and then Sean. Oh, and Natalie as well, of course.
So I think everybody has, all of SLT has sort of rounded up quite nicely, and just taking on board Councillor Sarah's comments around the clear clarification on the deferral signalled for cycleway projects, in terms of just making that really clear. It's not stopping those projects, it's just a funding allocation deferral for us, but making that really clear in that document, because they are important for the city. And yeah, so obviously, and the submitters signalled that also, so we'll work with Sean Hickey on that. But other than that, no, all good from me.
Thank you. Sean, I'll come back to you, and then I wouldn't mind hearing from Natalie as to whether she needs to talk to us about any comms or anything. So, Sean.
No, nothing from me, Mayor Paula.
Okay, and are you happy that the feedback that you've got from elected members is useful to you from pulling together that final report?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, as I said, so Well, some of it there's a bunch of there's a sort of a bunch of information that we can provide and sort of backfill sort of some gaps that there might exist, but I think we've got enough to complete the report for next week.
Thank you. Natalie, any concerns, questions or issues around the communications with the annual plan?
No, nothing from me. From here, we'll just be keeping the community and the submitters in the loop with the next steps of the annual plan process. And then once it's all confirmed and we have our clear plan, we'll be doing some comms and storytelling around what's coming up for the next, well, less than 12 months now, but what's coming up in the next little while. And again, emphasising how this ties into and leads into our long-term plan discussions, which will be starting obviously very soon. So no big issues from me at this point.
Thank you. And actually, I think that's a really key point, because we've all acknowledged that LTP and annual plan are not the same product, and there'll be some movement of issues. But of course, we're in this really unique situation of having the two things come quite close to each other. So we'll have just finished our annual plan. You guys get a small break, and then we're back into the warm lead up to the LTP, and then into the hard work of the LTP again. So the communication of that is going to be a little bit different because it's compressed. One will kind of naturally dovetail into the other, whereas we might have had a distinct break. So Sean, do you need anything else from elected members? Are there any aha moments, elected members? If you want to put your little blue hand up, I'll be able to see.
Mayor Paula, it's David here. Can I just
hi, yeah.
Can I just finish off the SLT round? My colleagues have just said.
Did I miss you in the end when you told me not to?
Yeah, but that's okay. Look, it's okay. I obviously haven't got the memo. No, everyone's covered it off. The only thing I'd like to add is, firstly, balancing the books are in a better position. We've gone from 11 to 5 million deficit, so that's largely the swaps initiative in the Finance Committee. Point one. Point two. Let's not forget the Finance Committee. When we actually have a 6-week cycle of which we can bring adjustments to the annual plan through the Finance Committee. So in terms of pressure around making a decision on the 23rd, it's not the 23rd or never. We can make forecast adjustments when new information comes to hand, and certainly through COVID, there is a lot of competing sort of forecasted sort of estimates around COVID that are going to continue for the rest of the year. So we can take the pressure off needing to be absolutely perfect at the annual plan, because we'll have many opportunities through the year through the Finance Committee to be able to adjust things as we learn more.
Thank you. Thank you. And that, yeah, again, that window of time has made that happen. All right, everyone. I think we're at it. We're it. So
I had my little blue hand up, Paula.
Oh, sorry, Sarah, go.
I just wanted to comment really in regard to the gully funding. So initially, the idea was, I guess 100,000 is really a drop in the bucket when it comes to having, supporting the restoration of the gullies. So staff initially suggested that we support the groups that are already well established and have been doing the most work in this area for the longest, because they're already so committed and have put so much into restoration over the years. So that was kind of the context of deciding to support I guess a number of the groups working on public land, which are the most established groups, if that makes sense. So if we wanted
thank you. I was aware, and thank you for the work that you've done on that. I know you've done a lot of work behind the scenes since I let go of it, but I just want to still see that big picture of what we actually have in gullies and what we're covering and why we're covering, so that there's some transparency around that in the debate and also in the final decision. They are good. They are all good groups. Don't get me wrong. They are.
Well, I'd be very open to us increasing the fund and increasing it out, but probably won't go super far. So but no, definitely fine.
All right, everyone. If once we've logged off, you go, oh, blow, should have asked that, then just email Sean, copy everyone else in so we can see what the thinking is. And we haven't got, but don't leave that too long, because as you can see, the staff are going to be working quite hard now to get that report out. We can table the odd late item, of course, if it's absolutely vital, but we'd really rather sort of get through this, do our deliberations and focus on the thing that we all want to focus on, which is the long-term plan where we start to make a more fundamental difference to how we do business. So thanks everyone. Thank you for the really good way that you've participated.
Just want to say this should be a pretty short meeting, eh? Now I can put the heat on.
I'm hopeful,
Yeah.
Mark.
Yeah. I just think if we had an eject seat, we'd eject you right now for jinxing it all.
I'll eject myself. See you, bye.
All right. Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Ka kite.